Hello, I'm Jennifer Byrne and welcome to your nightmare. If you want to know why we are doing this special on monsters and bloodsuckers, Exhibit A, Zombie Mayhem, in Jane Austen's core text, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Exhibit B, the Twilight series, which, as you probably know, has been on the bestseller list for years now. Fact is, horror is hot. And in fact, always has been. There's something we love about books that scare the hell out of us. And tonight we've summoned a quorum of dark souls to lead us through this murky netherworld. Cathrine Jinks is the author of more than 30 books in most genres and for all ages, including the reformed vampire support group. She's currently up to her neck in werewolf research for her next book. Will Elliott, his first novel was The Pilo Family Circus, picked up many major horror awards and was shortlisted alongside Stephen King for the 2007 International Horror Guild Award. His latest book, Strange Places, is a memoir in which both werewolves and vampires have walk-on roles. Leigh Blackmore is an academic, editor and contributor to such blood-drenched journals as the Australian Horror and Fantasy magazine, Terra Australis and the Encyclopedia of Supernatural Fiction, to name just a few. And Tara Moss, who writes best-selling crime novels and reads in even darker places, counting Dracula and Frankenstein among her favourite Gothic ghouls. Won't you please welcome them tonight? Monsters take many forms, and I thought tonight we'd start with the granddaddy, in literary terms, which is Frankenstein. Why Frankenstein? Why did that hit so big? I mean, describe the era that it published into.
The era, of course, was the era of high romanticism. So what was happening was there was Byrne, there was Shelley, these were the romantic poets, and what was happening was that the traditional role of the church and of God in society was diminishing and science was coming to the fore. And so there was this enormous thrust of industrialisation and all that sort of thing. And it is remarkable that Mary Shelley, for such a young woman, was able to grasp this, but she was really prophetic in the way that she...
Yeah, and an 18 or 19-year-old girl sitting there composing a book that, let alone would last 200 years, even for the time, was pretty outrageous.
But remarkably, she also... She based it on a dream, and, of course, the story is that Percy Shelley and Byrne also had stories that they all wrote together in the Villa Diodati in Switzerland. But her dream was what inspired the book to some extent. So it was a mix of conscious and unconscious influence.
She tapped into a common fear, which is probably what made the book such an icon, was that everyone probably had this subconscious fear that we were going to go too far with science because we were, you know, venturing into the unknown.
Now that we know with genetics and with medical and scientific advancements that they can, say, grow an ear on a rat, you know, we know this and it's disturbing to us, we can easily imagine that you could create life, but we probably still struggle with the idea of bringing back the dead. You know, that's the extra step.
But it's one of the reasons, isn't it, why Frankenstein has kept its, or Frankenstein's monster has kept its power, because it is so in an era of cloning and genetic engineering.
If Mary Shelley's mum died in childbirth, does this have anything to do with this, do you think? I mean, if it's an inanimate thing that's come to life, it's a kind of a...
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I think there are all sorts of psychological backgrounds that you could look into about why she conceived of the monster in the way that she did.
Yeah, so it's not just thinking of a bad boogeyman. You actually have to have a depth to it, don't you? Yeah.
On your point, though, it's the same fear today as it was back then. Are we going to go too far with science and learn things that aren't good for us, or things that changes that we can't go back from? You know,
are we God? Can we trust the scientists?
Exactly.
The questions are the same.
There was an interesting transition between the film and the book versions of Frankenstein, because it reached the stage within about 10 years of it being published as a book, and there were 5 versions on stage. I think it was by about 1826, and one of them was called Presumption, which is a really clear highlight on the fact that the book is all about, you know, this presumption of can we tamper with the natural world. And I think it is still a vital metaphor for, you know, it could be applied now to genetic engineering or nuclear power or other things where we're afraid that we might be playing in the domain of the divine.
I was going to move us forward about 80 years on from Frankenstein, and a man called Bram Stoker writes a book called Dracula, which takes all the existing mythology and lore and centuries of gossip and talk in the villages and turns it into this creature, Count Dracula, who probably has been the abiding... Who wants to start on Dracula?
Oh, I'm happy to. Dracula is one of my favourite books. I think it's interesting that the word Dracula means devil in Wallachia, and Wallachia was at the time, it's now southern Romania. In Romania, there was a real solid belief in vampires. And if we look at that period of time when the vampire legend was very strong, it's probably a legend informed by perhaps premature burials where people were found in their coffins to have moved, or they literally rose again and were walking around. I think a sort of pre-scientific explanation for some of these actual biological occurrences. Combine that with, you know, Puritanism and these sort of religious ideas, and I think that comes together very much in Bram Stoker's text. There's obviously a lot of talk about Bram Stoker's text being quite misogynist, and I think sticking stakes through beautiful young women's hearts while they're sleeping is probably...
They were vampires.
They were vampires, but more than that, I think they were wanton women. They weren't pure virgins, and there was this sense of kind of putting to death a desire, female desire. So if you want to look at it from a sort of a psychoanalytic viewpoint, I think there's a lot to be said about sexuality and perhaps types of sexuality that at the time weren't very well accepted.
Well, it is interesting, isn't it, that the vampire women in the Bram Stoker book are lascivious and have
bisexual.
And bisexual and have tremendous appetite. The vampire man, Count Dracula himself, I mean, there's a moment when he touches Jonathan Harker, the visitor, to his shores, and just a chill goes through him. He is disgusting. He is not sexy. Whereas the modern vampires, I mean, what in the vampire reform group, are they sexy vampires?
No, well, you see, to be honest, mine, I was getting heartily sick of sexy vampires, and I thought I'd like to have a bunch of total loser vampires who sat around watching television most of the time and were ill, it was a disease and all that kind of stuff. I just felt I wanted to do a bit of big debunking because I felt that, you know, the time had come, and I was looking around to see if there were any other sort of major debunkers of vampires, but there didn't seem to be, so I thought, oh, time to do it, I think. As an antidote, really. It's like a vampires. Grunge vampires, kind of boring, unappealing vampires. So.
You write in your memoir, at the very end of your memoir, Will, you said, I've seen a werewolf and I've been swooped by vampires. This was during a time when you were mentally not well.
Yes.
Tell us about that vampire.
Oh, I only saw it for a second. It was I was psychotic at the time.
This is why we have access. We want to hear what it was like.
Well, it was a glance. I was in a sort of in hospital in a sort of dentist chair type thing, and there was a sort of foam model head on the shelf, and it had drawn on it in crayon. It looked like fangs had been drawn on it. And then the woman who was doing some sort of test on me turned around, and just for a second I saw fangs in her mouth as clear as I can see your face right now. Sans fangs, of course. But yeah, just for a second I just saw it. And at the time, it would probably have freaked me out under normal circumstances, but that was just part of another, big, just an echo in a whole lot of other sort of things that were going on in the psychotic symptoms of the time. So.
But it does highlight, it is a creature of our nightmares,
Yes.
our madness, isn't it? I mean, it is in there. We all have this image.
Yeah, I think it was just, I wasn't influenced by any sort of innate fear. It was just the image from popular culture, which was in the mix of thoughts at the time, and it happened to be projected at that moment on that nurse who probably never bitten anyone, as far as I know.
Let's move on to werewolves, because they are, in a sense, the orphan monster, aren't they? They don't have their own core book. I mean, the others do.
There's no iconic book for the werewolf as there is for the vampire with Dracula, and the Greek and Romans used them. Ovid's Metamorphoses and Petronius, who wrote the Satyricon, both have werewolves in them. So they were obviously really ancient myths that the classical writers were drawing on.
My question is then, why have these these iconic ones like Frankenstein and Dracula particularly, which has been remade umpteen times, hasn't we? Have now Swamp Dracula, Western Dracula, Friendly Dracula, Good Dracula. Why have they lasted?
I think they've. I think the Dracula legend or the vampire legend has actually adapted as we have evolved. I think that when Dracula first came out in 1897, there's all this sexual kind of undercurrent in it, and there's Puritanism and all of this happening. But I think now that we're not so worried about losing our souls and being taken over by the devil, I think the vampire legend has become really romantic. And we can see this in Twilight, and we can even see this in, you know, the 1990 movie of Bram Stoker's Dracula, where they just introduced a love story, right?
We've gone to this benign period where Dracula, vampires were, as you say, they're sexy. They're very metro at the moment. Very metro vampire.
Very pretty.
Very pretty.
vampires
This is why I wrote this book. I think it's time.
But what I was going to say is but Guillermo del Toro, who's just written, the director of Pan's Labyrinth, of course, has just written a book called The Strain recently, where he returns back to the viral infection. He goes, which is your point, he goes back to the idea of not the vampire being something sexy and gorgeous and young and spunky, but something alien, other, contaminated, fundamentally parasitic and predatory. So it moves.
I think that's why, one of the reasons I think the horror is so popular, the whole idea of killing people, I think it's comforting to think that it's done by completely unhuman people. Like, they're not human. They've cut themselves off from the human race. So if you can, you know, if you can actually set them as monsters over there, it's much more
There's
comfortable.
the flip side to that too, because Dracula and the werewolf are supernatural creatures. They're completely non-human agents of the devil, if you like. But whereas Dr. Jekyll and Frankenstein's monster have that human element in them, so when you look at them, you're always looking into the human condition.
But the thing is, they are visibly evil. You can see they're evil just by looking at them. You know, if the most evil people in history, if Vlad the Impaler or even Hitler got on the train with you, and you never heard of them, you wouldn't look twice at them. They look like dweebs. You never, you know, who need to get out of the house more. If you look at Frankenstein or any of those monsters, they are clearly, visibly foul and rotten and evil. And what's more, they aren't even as bad as the historical characters they're based on. If Dracula's based on Vlad the Impaler, he's a kitten compared to him.
Yeah,
But I think
Vlad
that's
was a
what
truly
these books
horrible...
do is they take what's often hidden and the shadow side, if you like, of the human psyche, and they put it out there so that you can see it, and that's uncomfortable.
Yeah, but I think it's repackaging it in a way that we find more palatable, because we don't want to think that evil looks like us, you know.
Let's look at some of the modern monsters. What would you throw up as some examples of people who can, with pride, stand up out of their books and say, damn it, I'm a monster and I belong here alongside the Count and
I am
Frankenstein
Hannibal Lecter. I am one of the biggest icons of horror of the, you know, the 21st century. Hannibal Lecter is the gentleman monster. He is the modern Nosferatu, the modern Dracula.
And
sophisticated, intelligent, sexy perhaps not, but
so
charismatic.
gentlemanly.
So gentlemanly.
And again, he's nothing like real serial killers. No serial killer is really in the very high IQ range like Hannibal Lecter was supposed to be. They're usually dim to average people.
But he's a great monster.
But isn't it interesting how we get it immediately? I mean, Hannibal Lecter went from, you know, nowhere to right up there in the pantheon. We got it straight away. And that's what's interesting, like, just like people got Frankenstein's monster, they got Dracula, and I think we got Hannibal.
Well, Thomas Harris was very smart because he created a baddie who was better than all the other characters, not including Clarice, who was our protagonist, but, you know, the people who were in the prison that he was kept in. We didn't like them, especially the director of the prison. I mean, he was this horrible, sleazy character. So Thomas Harris managed to create a sympathetic bad guy who was smarter, more sophisticated, and more interesting than all the other characters. And that's, I think, what works with Dracula. He's got this kind of regal quality about him. And perhaps that's why werewolves don't have a classic book, is because of that bestial element. You don't have say, a sophisticated thinking monster traditionally with the werewolf.
Pretty hard to get around in society when you face is all hairy, things are sticking out.
Precisely.
Only once a month. Only once a month.
Other modern horror monsters, I'd have to nominate the Cenobites from Clive Barker's books, the Hellraiser books, who are incredibly demonic and evil. And I'd also mention H.P. Lovecraft, who talks about the old ones, who are these cosmic beings from outside the world of humankind, who also come in and...
Describe these beings.
The old ones are creatures that don't look at mankind as being of any importance whatsoever. They're completely alien, so that they're on another level from these ones that we're talking about, Dracula and Frankenstein and so on. Because they are
You're a
beyond
Lovecraft
us.
man too,
Absolutely.
aren't you?
I was going to say about Lovecraft, that's the thing, it's totally unrelated to all our previous fears and mythology. It's to me, it's sort of a cautionary tale about space exploration, maybe.
Well, yeah, I was just thinking that doesn't fall like into the sci-fi. Like we've got the Borg and we've got the sci-fi horror, which perhaps is slightly different from the. I don't know.
Yeah, but he's genuinely frightening. People who aren't bothered by other horror are freaked out by Lovecraft because he believes in these alien presences so much. You almost think he's looked out his window one night and seen something, and is merely using his stories to send a genuine warning about these creatures. I mean,
Well, these are trans-dimensional creatures.
Yeah, there's a sort of cosmic element to his horror, which is a little bit different, but it's also very... It scares you because it undermines your sense of reality.
And you only ever see a hint of the threat. You only, in the story, you see just a fraction, and there's a hint that behind it is an entirely different reality that is completely incompatible with ours, and that we're in danger of either waking it up or bringing it into our reality.
Why do we like reading about things that scare the hell out of us? Going right back to the start, why?
Well, I think that we need ways of dealing with our anxieties, and these things set up metaphors that we can read about safely, you know. They're...
As you're under the covers, do you tell yourself that? I really need this.
We need ways of projecting our own interior fears onto the outside world and sort of looking at them and going, yes, there is a shadow within us. We need to look at it closely and understand what it is and examine it. And once we really come to grips with that, then we can sort of understand ourselves better. We like to be scared. I think there's still that primitive tingle of the fear up the spine.
Why do people go to you know, amusement parks and do stupid things on rides?
There's the adrenaline rush of it. Yeah.
Fear is an entirely healthy, natural thing. It is perfectly normal and healthy to be afraid of a hungry lion. You know, it's how we survived to this point. So
yes, but we didn't go and choose to climb in the cage with the hungry lion.
But we're pretty comfortable
We chose
now.
to buy this book.
True. Yeah, in that sense, I don't know. Maybe we just need to feel that sense of being aware of where the dangers are. It's a survival instinct, I guess.
It's very similar to the crime novel in some ways. I don't know if Toro would agree, but crime also uses those dark areas, and we like to look into those dark areas and find out about them, even if we're never going to have anything to do with those in our real lives.
Well, I think it's reassuring on some level to explore the dark side and then decide that we're on the good side and close the book at the end. And it's what we see people reading crime fiction and wanting to find, I suppose, a resolution at the end of the book. You want to read one of these and know that you're not a vampire, but you've explored that world and you can kind of feel comfortable with yourself, close the book and say, that's just fiction. Or you can watch CSI and think, oh, there's good guys and bad guys, they solved it, and you put it away. It's not your life. You know, this isn't me, this isn't my world, but you can explore it
you're
because
physically holding the book, the source of this fear. You can set it down at any time.
Yes, you
It
control the
holds-
fear.
Yeah.
It holds particular relevance if you're of a certain age too, like if you're a teenager and you're going through adolescence and you're sprouting all these hairs and weird things are happening to your body, you're going to resonate with these characters.
It's true, isn't it? I mean, it's particularly popular with adolescents. I mean, that's when they start reading horror, by and large. Real-life crimes that we know about now, whether it's... will they become the monsters of the future? For instance, will there be, in Port Arthur, in 150 years' time, people who talk of a white-haired man with wild blue eyes who walks the ruins and destroys lives? Will they become real?
I think if you go into the area of ghost legendary and that sort of thing, that's a possible area where that myth might live on and take on a life of its own. But I think in a lot of ways the true crime stuff has a banality about it that doesn't last. And I think the supernatural creatures resonate on a different level, a deeper level, and that's why their power continues. I think the true crime, certainly the serial killer is a fascinating figure, and we're sort of obsessed with it in the modern era. But I think in a lot of ways that perhaps in 100 years' time, that won't be so important, whereas the power of blood will always be there because it's the life force and it's always with us.
So it's no accident that these, going back to what we're saying about it hits fast, that it's this concept that you need almost a trick, a cell, something special, like you rise from the dead.
Yeah. Dracula, Bram Stoker used experts. He had a guy called Arminius Vanbury who gave him a lot of historical research on the Nosferatu.
What a great name.
And I think Dracula wouldn't have been as successful without, you know, his tapping into the knowledge of this guy who knew all about the Romanian legends. But, I mean, it's certainly, you've got to have the right combination of elements, as you know, as any author would know. Some things strike a chord and some things don't at a moment in time.
You're working on werewolves. You've done your vampire reform. Do you think they remain the two great, iconic monsters?
Well,
there's room for more.
Well, yeah, I think with nice iconic, people like iconic because they can go, yep, I understand exactly what you're talking about. So it gives you don't have to explain anything. You just have to give them sort of a variation on the theme. It's just a nice, easy, shortcut kind of way of telling a story, and people, you know, snap onto icons very cleverly, whereas...
Particularly writers. I mean, I suppose it's great for a writer because you just need to mention the cape or something and you're there.
Yeah, that's right. So I think it will continue simply because of the amount of stuff that's gone before. You know, there's just there's an endless...
I think each new manifestation of the monster sort of picks up on all the resonances of the ones that have come before. So.
And will Hannibal last?
I suspect he will because he's one of the most recognised real people for kids when they're polled in schools. A lot of people believe, young people, not us obviously, believe Hannibal Lecter was a real person. Just like a lot of people when polled believe that Dracula was a real person, and they mix up the Vlad the Impaler historical figure with Dracula, and there's actually not all that much similarity between the two really, apart from there being a lot of blood involved. So I think Hannibal Lecter might be one of those iconic...
Because, I mean, the very fact that Hannibal was based on about 2 or 3 actual real serial killers, sort of it sort of sounds like Dracula being based on various things, you know, put together.
There is a hint of the supernatural about Hannibal too, which gets overlooked a bit in the movies, because in the books he has maroon eyes and he has 6 fingers on his left hand. So he's not a normal human being.
Just really quickly, if you were advocating any of these books, I mean, we've focused on some of the core monsters, but there are so many versions of them, and we haven't even touched on the Anne Rice Vampire Chronicles. For readers, suggestion, pick one.
Of those books, like my book, for example.
Your book?
If you're sick
Apart from your own book.
well, actually, the one that Werewolf of Paris is damn good, man. I was really impressed by it. I think that's one of those ones where you're pleasurably surprised and well worth a little look at.
It is.
Even if you can't find it, because it's hard.
We're going to give you all the details on the website. So if you can, The Werewolf of Paris, I know, it was my surprise too.
Dracula, points for honesty, because he's the only one that is charismatic or can sort of pass one of us out of the classic villains and monsters.
Another werewolf one, if you can find it, very hard to find at the moment, but Thomas Tessier, the Nightwalker, an author not well enough known, but this is about a Vietnam vet who turns into a werewolf. Fantastic story and brilliantly written.
Okay. Tara?
I'm seconding Dracula along with Will, and I would say that as a horror nerd, this was the most exciting thing for me to find the other day. It's the new annotated version of Dracula by Leslie Klinger. So they've got the text in there from Dracula written by Bram Stoker, but also all these fascinating notes where you'll actually see Leslie has found where Van Helsing contradicts himself in his description of what happens with vampires. There's also, I mean, it is physically beautiful. Such a delight to get into. And if you will indulge me for a moment, I'd love to read this fantastic review of Dracula from 1897 when it came out. It makes you think of sort of things people say about Twilight and the Da Vinci Code. Anything that's really popular tends to get sort of slammed quite badly. If you have the bad taste after this warning to attempt the book, you will read on to the finish as I did, and go to bed as I did, feeling furtively in your throat. This is the San Francisco Chronicle in 1899, and they termed it one of the most powerful novels of the day, superb, which stamps itself on the memory. But obviously they're telling you not to read it.
Well, I would just like to say also, on behalf of all horror lovers, we should stand together and resist the pressure to make us feel bad people. And don't we all feel
Just a little bad.
Readers of horror are looked down on. Isn't that true, Leigh?
Not amongst other readers of horror.
Not amongst other readers of horror, but I think, yeah, horror is sometimes judged by its worst examples, which is unfortunate. There's lots of good horror stuff.
I'm a little bit worried. A couple of times I've had readers come up to me and sort of say, I like the violence in your work. Cool.
Oh. No, see, I wrote a horror story called The Road, which was kind of quite gory, and geez, I had some friends kind of, I can't believe you had that in your head. They really, writing and not just reading it, really puts you in the wrong, doesn't it?
Anyway, have courage. And this is the little book that that Cathrine and I were talking about, The Werewolf of Paris. It's just you can see it's a little library book. We will give you all the information on the website. And a big thank you very much to our guests tonight. Thank you so much to Cathrine Jinks, to Will Elliott, to Leigh Blackmore and to Tara Moss. Thank you. So look up the website for details so you too can join this ghoul fest. And you will also there find the podcast of the show, and of course you can follow us on Twitter. Thank you so much for watching. It's been lovely to have your company. Join us on the first Tuesday of next month for Book Club. Until then, very happy reading, and remember, just keep telling yourself it's only a book. It's only a book. Only a book. Good night.